Karen called HOA about my mailbox. I'm the HOA president. It started with a mailbox, not even a fancy one, just a black cast iron replica of the ones you'd see in 1950s Americana catalogs. Slightly rusted at the corners, but solid, reliable. The kind my dad and I had picked out together before he passed. We'd installed it with care, leveled it, mounted it in concrete, even painted our family name in gold leaf letters on the side. It was nostalgic, personal, and apparently, it infuriated Karen. I moved into Sycamore Hills 6 months ago after accepting a quieter position in the same city I'd worked my whole career in. It was time to downshift. At 47, with two grown kids and a full career behind me, I wanted to enjoy my home, my garden, and my dog, a stubborn senior lab named Duke, who only liked two people in the world, me and anyone who gave him peanut butter. Most people in the neighborhood were kind enough. Retired teachers, young couples, a few veterans. People waved, kept their hedges trimmed, and let folks be, except for Karen. Karen Lancaster lived across the cul-de-sac in a beige monstrosity with three flags on her porch. Two American, one with her last name in cursive over a fake gold eagle. She was the self-declared enforcement arm of a homeowner association that technically didn't even exist anymore. Sycamore Hills' original HOA had dissolved in 2012 due to mismanagement and fraud, but Karen clung to the outdated bylaws like they were the Ten Commandments. She printed them on glossy pamphlets, slid them into mailboxes, and cited them on laminated warning cards she'd taped to your door. No one had voted her in. No one gave her permission. That didn't stop her, and she really, really hated my mailbox. It's non-compliant. She snapped one morning as I was watering the tulips by the porch. She stood on the curb, arms folded like a poorly dressed scarecrow. It's not in regulation with HOA Article 6, Section 3. There is no Article 6, I said, calmly adjusting the hose nozzle. Because there's no active HOA, her eyes narrowed. Then why are you listed in the records as HOA president? I blinked. I'm sorry, what she smirked. Exactly. I found the filings. I paused. Because that part was technically true. Before the HOA folded, I had been asked to temporarily fill a board seat, mostly to supervise the dissolution process. I was a real estate compliance attorney at the time. I'd filed the disbandment documents myself. Somehow, she'd gotten a hold of the old archive and twisted it into a story that suited her. I should have laughed her off then, but I didn't. Because that day, she started taking pictures of my mailbox, and then came the letters. First, it was a final warning printed in Comic Sans. Then, a notice of fine for aesthetic disruption to the uniform design plan of the community. That one came with a $250 charge. I tore it up. Then Duke found a raw chicken thigh, tossed into my yard with crushed pills in it. He didn't eat it, thank God. But I kept the Ziploc bag and called my friend Ellie at Animal Services. We both knew who had thrown it, though she couldn't prove it. You've got a situation, Ellie warned. This isn't just passive-aggressive anymore. It's targeted. Still, I let it ride. I was the adult. I believed in neighbors talking things out. I figured she'd move on to someone else's porch flags or garden gnomes. But then came the morning when I found my mailbox knocked clean off its post, split at the base, letters scattered in the street like confetti. One of them was a birthday card from my daughter, with a Polaroid inside. The photo was gone. The image of that broken mailbox haunted me more than I'd expected. It wasn't about the metal or the money, it was about my dad. The last thing he and I had built together before he passed. And it was about that missing Polaroid. My daughter, Sarah, had taken it just a week earlier, her in her med school scrubs, holding Duke, grinning like she was 8 again. That picture was in the card. I'd called her later, voice tight. She'd been heartbroken. It's just a photo. Dad, she'd said gently. No, it wasn't. It was a moment. It was ours. And Karen had taken it. I filed a police report, even though I knew nothing would come of it. The responding officer, a young guy named Daniels, said what I already knew. Unless there's video or a witness, we can't do much. Mr. Tran, But I did have video, or at least I did now. After that incident, I installed 3 motion-triggered cameras. One was camouflaged under the birdhouse on my porch, another inside a weatherproof floodlight casing near the garage, and a third just under Duke's favorite lounging window. That night, I reviewed the previous week's footage. At 3:12 a.m., 2 days before the mailbox was destroyed, Karen could be seen standing across the street, arms folded, phone out. She wasn't on her property. She was 5 feet onto mine, leaning close to inspect something. She reached out, tapped the mailbox with her knuckles, then turned and left. But it was the next night that sealed it. At 2:48 a.m., a figure approached the mailbox. No uniform, no vehicle, just a flashlight and a pry bar. Karen. She wasn't subtle. She yanked the post back and forth until it cracked at the base. The metal box crashed down, spilling letters across the street. She looked both ways, then jogged off in a ridiculous pink velour tracksuit, the timestamp, the clear angle, the grin on her face. I clipped the video and uploaded it to a secure cloud server, sent a copy to Daniels and another to my attorney, but I didn't confront her. Not yet. By Wednesday, Karen had replaced my mailbox. Yes, replaced it. It was a cheap aluminum unit with a plastic red flag, zip-tied to a stake in the ground. No mounting, no lock, just sitting there like a cheap apology stapled to an insult. Taped to the side was a printed letter on fake HOA letterhead, permitted box installation as per. HOA guidelines compliance required. Under that, her signature, Karen Lancaster, acting HOA chairwoman. It was laughable until I saw she had delivered similar letters to 6 other homes. One to Ms. Romero, a widow with a blue mailbox her grandkids had painted for her birthday. One to the Watsons, who had a black box with their house number in Korean script. And one to the Nguyens, whose mailbox was mounted on a carved cedar post shaped like a dragon. Karen was targeting anyone who didn't match her vision. That's when I made a call to the county recorder's office and requested HOA documentation. It was time to expose the fraud. What I found shocked even me. Karen had filed a fake reactivation request with the county, forged under an LLC that didn't exist. She claimed to have reinstated the HOA by popular vote, citing a fake meeting held at a local diner, one that no one remembered attending. She listed herself as chair, a man named Greg Tyler as compliance officer, and me as inactive co-chair. She'd used my old signature from public HOA archives, ones I'd filed a decade ago. I forwarded everything to my attorney, who confirmed my suspicion she'd committed document fraud, identity misuse, and impersonation of a legal board. That's not just an HOA issue, he said. That's criminal. And still, I waited, because while legal gears turned slowly, Karen moved fast. Within days, she posted laminated violations on several houses, mailbox noncompliance, excessive yard ornaments, and one poor woman cited for unsanctioned solar lights. She even taped an orange sticker on Ms. Romero's porch. Final warning before board action. Neighbors were scared. Some even removed their mailboxes voluntarily, thinking they were out of line. That was the tipping point. I called a community meeting, and not at some stuffy conference room either. I hosted it on my lawn, under string lights, with coffee and cookies from the local bakery. I set up a projector and speakers. People showed up in folding chairs, lawn blankets, even coolers. And when I played the footage of Karen destroying my mailbox, silence fell like a curtain. When the lights came back on, the anger was thick in the air. "She's gone too far," someone muttered. "She threatened to fine me if I didn't trim my lavender bush," said Ms. Romero. "My son's name is on our mailbox in Korean, and she said it was foreign clutter." Mr. Watson said, voice trembling. "That was the night we formed the alliance. Not a committee, not an HOA, a group of neighbors with rights, voices, and now proof. We had a plan. And Karen was about to find out what real governance looked like. The next morning, I got a call from the county's legal counsel, Apparently, the complaint I filed with documentation, video, and a notarized statement had triggered something big. Turns out, Karen's little HOA revival wasn't just unethical. It was illegal. Forgery, falsifying public records, impersonation, all stacked up into a case that even the slowest bureaucrat couldn't ignore. A cease and desist letter was immediately drafted and emailed to the so-called HOA board. Karen was the only recipient. The rest of the names she listed fake or unwilling participants who had no idea they'd been listed on official documents. But that didn't stop her. By noon, she was patrolling the neighborhood again, clipboard in hand, documenting lawn heights and writing infractions. She even yelled at Mr. Halbert's daughter for hanging tie-dye sheets out to dry on a line, claiming it violated public aesthetic standards. I watched from my porch, coffee in hand, not saying a word. The cease and desist hadn't hit her inbox yet. By 3 p.m. Ma'am, it had. I heard it before I saw it. The scream, shrill, primal, echoing through the cul-de-sac like a car alarm. Karen marched down the sidewalk, waving her phone like it was on fire, yelling, "This is libel. This is harassment. I am the HOA." That was the moment I stepped off my porch. I walked right up to her, staying calm. Neighbors peeking out from windows and over fences. "You forged my signature," I said quietly. "You listed me as your co-chair. That's a felony." She blinked, then blinked again. "You don't understand." I raised a hand. "I understand just fine. You fabricated an entire system of authority and bullied this community. You stole my mail, you vandalized my property, and you're going to be held accountable." "This is a misunderstanding," she muttered, but her voice was hollow now, shaky. That's when I showed her the printout. The same video footage, the notarized statements, the official county stamp invalidating her entire HOA. "You are not above the law," I told her. She dropped the clipboard and ran. Karen ran. She took off like a squirrel from a dog, heels clicking against the pavement as she sprinted down the street toward her house. Neighbors streamed outside, some with phones, others just to see what the noise was. It wasn't just a scene, it was a spectacle. The very next day, a county investigator arrived. Karen's documents were seized, her computer too, and within 48 hours, she was served with multiple charges. But this wasn't over. Not yet. Because it turned out Karen had been trying to sell her fake HOA memberships online, promoting the exclusive benefits of living in a private community on a shady website, using stock photos of pools, parks, and tennis courts that didn't exist. She'd conned 3 prospective buyers out of over $25,000 in initial compliance fees. One of them showed up crying to my door, asking if any of it was real. He had moved from out of state. I assured him the house was real, but Karen's world. That was the fantasy. That night, our alliance decided to hold a press conference. Local news stations picked it up. I stood at the mic in front of the neighborhood sign, flanked by Ms. Romero, the Watsons, and the county legal rep. "I am the actual HOA president." I began, "But this community hasn't had a formal board in over 5 years. Everything this woman claimed, she fabricated to control us. She destroyed property. She threatened neighbors. She committed fraud. And it stops now." The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was thunderous. Years of pent-up fear and frustration, finally released. Karen was arrested 3 days later. Her mugshot made the evening news. And the mailbox she tried to erase, I rebuilt it. Not as it was before, but bigger, stronger, with a plaque at the base that read, "Property of the community, not for sale." Karen's arrest didn't happen in the shadows. It happened at 10:17 a.m. on a Saturday, with 2 sheriff's vehicles pulling up to her driveway just as she stepped outside with her faux official clipboard. It was like watching a mask melt off in real time. She tried to argue. Of course she did. She waved papers, cried about entrapment, screamed that I was orchestrating a conspiracy. The officers weren't having it. They read her the charges calmly. Professionally mail tampering, impersonation of a public official, wire fraud, falsifying documents, and harassment. I watched from across the street with Ms. Romero and the Watsons. Half the block stood silent, filming. The other half clapped. A few cried. Karen, for all her noise, didn't have a single ally left. As she was loaded into the cruiser, someone in the crowd shouted, "Where's your HOA now?" That earned a few chuckles. But the mood wasn't celebratory, it was cathartic. With Karen gone, the damage came into sharp relief. Mailboxes were dented or broken. Lawn signs were missing. Fences had been vandalized. More than a few neighbors reported their security cameras tampered with, wires cut, or memory cards gone. We held a town hall that week, not in some sterile building, but on my front lawn under string lights. Everyone gathered in lawn chairs or sitting on coolers. It felt real. Ms. Romero brought empanadas. Someone else passed around lemonade. For the first time, we were truly neighbors. I stood before them and said, "We can either let one person's chaos define this place, or we can build something real, together." That night, we voted formally and unanimously to establish a new HOA, a legitimate one. We filed papers, elected a board, drafted bylaws that protected homeowner rights without opening the door for tyranny. I stayed on as president, but this time, I wasn't alone. We started fixing what Karen broke, replaced fences, restored mailboxes, pooled funds to help the victims she scammed get legal aid. And we didn't just patch holes in wood, we patched wounds in trust. Then came the interviews. CNN picked it up first, then a podcast. Suddenly, our little cul-de-sac was a case study in civic resistance and neighborhood reform. The narrative wasn't just about a rogue fake HOA anymore. It was about what happens when good people stop staying quiet. Karen's trial date was set 3 months out. In the meantime, she was under house arrest with a GPS ankle monitor. Even that didn't stop her from sending passive-aggressive cease and desist letters, unsigned, unheaded, meaningless. We used them as kindling at the next block party. That party run, by the way, was themed Mailbox Liberation Day. We grilled, we danced, we laughed like we hadn't in years. And when the sun dipped low, I stood by the rebuilt mailbox, the one with the plaque, and watched as neighbors added their own touches. A flower pot, a tiny American flag. Someone even slipped a small thank you card inside. It read, "For standing up when we couldn't." Karen watched the whole thing from her window. She drew the curtains around dusk, and we never saw her come out again. The impact rippled far beyond our block. Local government proposed new ordinances around HOA formation, requiring public hearings and county oversight. Fraud prevention training was offered. Even the state AG's office opened an inquiry into similar scams. Karen, inadvertently, had sparked a movement, but to us, it wasn't about laws. It was about reclaiming dignity, rebuilding trust, and restoring what it means to live next door to someone and see them not as an enemy or a threat, but as a neighbor. The day of Karen's trial finally arrived. It was a crisp fall morning, the kind that smells like wood smoke and carries a bite of change. A group of us carpooled to the courthouse. Miss Romero, the Watsons, even Mr. Ellis, who hadn't left his house in months before all this. We didn't go to gloat. We went to bear witness. Karen arrived wearing a blazer 3 sizes too tight and a scowl that could melt glass. Her lawyer tried to posture, but the charges spoke louder than any defense. The prosecutor opened with a statement that hushed the room. This isn't just about one woman's abuse of power, it's about how easily silence can become complicity. Testimonies followed. I spoke about the mailbox, about the intimidation, the falsified letters. Miss Romero described how Karen forged her signature on fake fines. The Watsons recounted the time their son's college acceptance banner was ripped down and burned. Karen claimed it was visual clutter. Every story hit like a hammer. And every time Karen rolled her eyes or muttered under her breath, it only strengthened our resolve. The verdict came down just after lunch, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 2 years in county jail, plus restitution to the victims and mandatory psychological evaluation. No one cheered. It wasn't about punishment. It was about closure. Karen wept finally, but the tears came too late. Even her husband, who had filed for divorce quietly after her arrest, didn't show up. After the trial, the courthouse steps became a place of reckoning. Reporters swarmed us, asking what we do next. I said, we go home, we keep building, and we never let another Karen take root again. Back on the block, something remarkable began to happen. The story inspired nearby neighborhoods to review their own HOAs. Some dissolved entirely. Others rewrote their charters with community input. The county council held a public forum, the first of its kind, on HOA abuse. Dozens showed up to speak. Kids who'd once stayed indoors now played freely in the street. Porch lights that had once gone dim in tension now glowed with warmth. Neighbors who barely spoke were now swapping recipes and tools. But my favorite moment came a month later, when little Ava from next door handed me a drawing. It showed our mailbox, tall and proud, surrounded by smiling stick figure neighbors and a big yellow sun. She'd written in crayon, "Thank you for fixing the bad lady." I framed it and hung it in our new HOA office, a converted shed donated by the community. On its door, a simple sign, "Neighbors First." Karen's name faded, but the lesson didn't. We learned that silence is the soil where tyranny grows, and that truth, once spoken, spreads like wildflowers. If you've ever been bullied by a false authority, manipulated by fake rules, or felt alone in your fight, know this: you're not alone. Your voice matters. And sometimes the biggest victories start with standing your ground over something as small as a mailbox. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever faced a fake authority figure in your community? Share your story. Speak your truth. Let's rebuild together.